Let me say how happy I am that we are. I don't remember what's the last time that I, as an economist, and I'm very honored to have here very renowned economists with me. I'll come back to the panel in a minute, but that I'm sitting together with philosophers, sociologists, I don't know what else, there are psychologists, I'm pretty sure, in the room discussing something in an interdisciplinary manner. Maybe that's an exception, but hopefully it's actually a sign of new times coming, because with the challenges that we have ahead globally, but also in this country in particular, I think we will have to be looking at issues like corruption in a complex, interdisciplinary, in any way we can to think of how to solve them. So thank you for inviting us. We are the panel of economists in a 3-day conference that did not feature any economists that I can identify. And I would like to say a few words just to say that economists like to believe, I could challenge that sometimes, that their analysis is dispassionate, it's scientific, that they do not look at issues from a moral or ethical or philosophical point of view, but rather that they're always looking at the incentives and the costs of certain actions within the broader context of rational choice. I am sure that we will, in that sense, be bringing some technicalities to the discussion, but what is really important is that that economist's view, in my opinion, has affected very much the discourse about corruption, about institution building more broadly over the past 2 decades. And I would hope, and I will say in a minute why, that this panel is able to bring some very interesting light to this discussion, because after 20 or so years of this economic rational choice discourse largely dominating the global discourse on institution building, we might be also coming to a realization that this kind of dialogue with other aspects that affect social dialogue and institution building is important and necessary. I am myself, I took the role of being a moderator because I myself am really not an expert or even a student of corruption. As you know, probably, I mean, I have been a minister in this country and governor, and I've been in international organizations before and after. I have had to deal with the reality of both corruption and anti-corruption institution building, and I have some simply personal views on that, and I think I should leave that entirely for the discussion. But I am very excited and honored to have here today. First of all, I'll introduce all the panelists, but first of all, Professor Vito Tanzi, who I am sure you have heard of, but for us economists, it's really a huge honor to have you here, Professor. Professor Tanzi is today an honorary president of the International Institute for Public Finance, and this is important just to illustrate this the position that he holds in the economics profession as a student of public finance. He previously, he's actually best known for his work as the head of the fiscal department of the International Monetary Fund, which he held for nearly 20 years, and in this position he's made really huge contributions to our understanding of public finance and fiscal economics. I mean, in economics we even have an effect of inflation on public finances named after Professor Tanzi, the Tanzi effect. But it is very exciting that Professor Tanzi was somebody who was also in his previous life in the real world, a state secretary of the Ministry of Finance and Economy in the Italian government. So when he speaks about institutions, he speaks about it with a true knowledge of them. Professor Tanzi is also somebody who in the field of corruption has made particular contributions, and actually to this day the definition of corruption that we economists rely on most has been given by Professor Tanzi, but I will let him speak of it. In this company, we have decided to give the floor, the center of the presentation to Professor Tanzi, and so this is not exactly going to be the same format as what you have seen in the previous days. We will, depending on the length and question and answers that might come right after, for clarifications, I would say, after Professor Tanzi's presentation, we will have the honor of hearing Professor Ljubomir Mađar, who will speak about corruption in Serbia, in the Serbian context. Professor Mađar is now president of the University Braća Karić and professor of economics. Ex-president. Ex-president, well, and Professor Mađar was just saying how nice it is to be retired. I think I've heard something about that from Professor Tanzi as well. They really now are enjoying the luxury both of thinking and writing about what they're most interested in, so we will really be able to benefit from these perspectives. But Professor Mađar, I must also say, I remember as a student, he was the guy that knew the math, but he really also knew the economics. The economics faculty in Belgrade had mathematicians, but the economists did not necessarily dominate the math as well, especially not in the times when I was studying. And Professor Mađar really was the personification of an understanding of what rigorous economics is about. However, by the 90s, he himself as well had the opportunity and interest to work in the real world, in our efforts to privatize the economy. He briefly was a minister of economy in the government of Mr. Panic, but after that worked on privatization as well. So again, institution building, both theoretically and practically is something that Professor Mađar understands very well. So, lastly, but not least, Goran Radosavljević, a colleague of mine as well, has a Master's of Science from the Mathematical Economy and Econometry from the School of Advanced Studies in the Social Sciences, the École des Hautes Études des Sciences Sociales in Paris. He's completing his PhD right now, but I have thought that it would be very interesting to have Goran Radosavljević, who also has now an inside experience of being first an advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister and then State Secretary in the Ministry of Finance in the previous government, is the government that has ended just in this May. He had a very hands-on experience with the law on public procurement, among many other issues, and told me fascinating stories about his battles, trying to, in fact, balance the effort to respond to concerns about corruption, but at the same time keep the ability of the state to make good and flexible necessary choices. So I thought that it would be also very interesting, after we have moved to, from Professor Mađar's bringing the corruption discussion to the Serbian case, to have in a way a case study, hands-on with all its technicalities, for you to hear and reflect on, or for us to hear and reflect on. So I am, once again, very excited by the panel, but we will try to play it a bit by ear. I see my role after all the presentations to ask some of the questions that have bothered me, that I am curious about, but that I myself don't have answers to, so I wasn't ready to present. But I hope that by the time all three presentations are finished, you all will be also burning with questions, and we will have a good discussion. We will take a break either after Professor Tanzi's presentation or after all three. Let's play it by ear to see how the time goes. And Professor Tanzi, thank you very much for coming, and the floor is yours.